right, welcome back. Continuing what I was sharing with you during the first part of the podcast, this lengthy report put together by the Associated Press about how the U.S. Border Patrol is monitoring U.S. drivers and detaining anyone that they consider to be involved in suspicious travel patterns. And they make the determination, or AI makes the determination, what constitutes suspicious. So, like I mentioned right before the break, the Border Patrol has defined its own criteria for which drivers' behavior should be deemed suspicious. We don't know what it is. You don't know. Nobody fucking knows unless you're part of the Border Patrol. They stop people for anything from driving on backcountry roads, being in a rental car, making short trips to the border region when it involves the border. The Border Patrol's network of cameras now extends along the southern border in Texas, Arizona, California, but it also monitors drivers traveling near the U.S.-Canada border and in the interior of this country. Look what is about to happen in New Orleans. New Orleans is not on the U.S. border. Well, they're on the border of the Gulf of Mexico, but they're not on the U.S. border. But what did I tell you the other day? 350 Border Patrol agents are heading for New Orleans to start harassing people there. The polyglot community of New Orleans is unlike any other city in this country, I can safely say. Can you imagine what's going to happen in New Orleans? But that's a different topic, and I'm sure it'll be front and center when these Nazi fuckers get down there. But anyway, the surveillance program, not just along Texas, Arizona, California, U.S.-Canada border, no, also reaches far into the interior. And it has an impact on people living in big metropolitan areas and people driving to and from large cities like Chicago and Detroit. I mean, I grew up in Toledo, Ohio, and Detroit was 46 miles north of Toledo. And I can't tell you how many times I drove to and from Detroit, or to get to Detroit and go across the Ambassador Bridge into Windsor, Ontario. Dozens of times when I was a teenager, when I was in high school. Now, I wouldn't even fucking think about it, I don't think. Where was I? So the surveillance now impacts people who live in Chicago and Detroit, as well as people who drive from Los Angeles to, say, San Antonio, Texas, or Houston, or to and from the Mexican border region. In one example, the Associated Press found that the CBP had placed at least 4 cameras in the greater Phoenix area over the years, one of which was more than 120 miles away from the Mexican frontier. Now, the agency claims jurisdiction up to 100 miles from a land or sea border. I guess that's why they're heading to New Orleans, because it does border, well, sort of a sea, right? The Associated Press also identified several camera locations in metropolitan Detroit, as well as one place near the Michigan-Indiana border. And that one was to capture traffic headed towards Chicago or Gary, Indiana, or any other nearby designation. I mean, Toledo, fucking Ohio, again, where I grew up, that's right on the state line. It butts up against the state line of Michigan, Ohio. And it's a quick drive, 45-minute drive, depending on the traffic, from Toledo to Detroit. And then to go across the Ambassador Bridge is what, another 30 minutes. So maybe Custom and Border Protection have determined that Detroit is now an entry point of human trafficking, drugs, or maybe they haven't. Maybe they are just now gathering the kind of information that a dictatorial fascist government demands to have. As much information as possible on this and beyond on the citizens of the country being swallowed by fascism. Gentle listener, this shit is happening now. I mean, it's happening right now. And it's going to continue unabated until and if the American people make it stop. And you know what we have to do to make it stop. Now, of course, the Border Patrol, their parent agency, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, they squeak and squeal and said, well, we use license plate readers to help identify threats and disrupt criminal networks, and we're governed by a stringent multi-layered policy framework as well as federal law and constitutional protection to ensure the technology is applied responsibly and for clearly defined security purposes. Bullshit. Of course, that's what they say. And the agency added that for national security reasons, they don't detail the specific operational applications. Huh? And the U.S. Border Patrol primarily, like I mentioned, it's I don't know if it's operates within 100 miles of any border as part of their framework, part of what they're charged with doing. But the agency added, Border Patrol added, that it is legally allowed, quote, to operate anywhere in the United States, end quote. When did that happen? Has it always been that way? I can assure you, and you don't need my assurance for this at all, but this kind of shit that the Associated Press is describing in their article, and I'm passing on to you, this kind of shit has not happened until this rotten fucking Nazi Donald Trump and the slime who operate around him took control of this country. And yet we continue to believe, don't we, that next November there's going to be so-called midterm elections. And in 2028, this rabid fucking Donald Trump is going to retire to Mar-a-Lago. Now, the AP says this: while collecting license plates from cars on public roads has generally been upheld by courts, some legal scholars see the growth of large digital surveillance networks, such as the Border Patrols, as raising constitutional questions. Well, yeah, I immediately think of the First Amendment, or the right of Americans to travel freely within the country from state to state, or the Fifth Amendment, or the Fourth Amendment, or the Eighth Amendment. It raises constitutional questions. You bet your ass it raises constitutional questions. And apparently courts have started to recognize that, quote, large-scale surveillance technology that's capturing everyone and everywhere at every time might be unconstitutional under the Fourth Amendment. And, of course, that's the one that protects people from unreasonable searches. That's according to a law professor at George Washington University. Well, you can bet your ass that he is now in the targeting scope of the Border Patrol and the toilet rat. So, an executive director of the Center for Constitutional Democracy at the University of California Law Center in San Francisco, Nicole Ozar, she said this, quote, they're collecting mass amounts of information about who people are, where they go, what they do, who they know, engaging in dragnet surveillance of Americans on the streets, on the highways, in their cities, in their communities. End quote. Oh, and then Professor or the director, Nicole Ozar, added, quote, these surveillance systems do not make communities safer, end quote. Well, if I might suggest, they are not designed to make people safer. They're not. That's not the function. They're designed to accumulate information on as many people, citizens in this country, that can then be used in the same manner that it's used in Russia or China or Iran or Turkey or any country that is experimenting with fascism and slowly working its way toward total control. It's happening here. Border Patrol agents and local law enforcement shared information about U.S. citizens' social media profiles. Are you on social media? Perhaps the very people that you would prefer not to have all this information, the profile on you, now have it. Period. Which includes home addresses. And when people are stopped on the road because of this surveillance system, all that information pops up on the screen inside the officer's car. Everything. And it's now to the point where the Border Patrol is able to determine whether vehicles were rentals and whether drivers worked for rideshare services. They gather that not by looking at your driver's license, but by looking at the license plate on the vehicle that you're driving in. Now, in some areas, the AP reports, federal agents, quote, actually watch travel patterns on the highway in real time through license plate scans and other surveillance technology. And this particular person, I don't have his name, he added this, quote, I just know that they have a lot of toys over there on the federal side, end quote. How does this affect you? Huh? Now, Border Patrol, which is the Border Protection Agency, that agency got authorization to run this domestic license plate reader program 8 years ago. Who was president 2017? Who was president? That's according to a Department of Homeland Security policy document. At the time, the agency said that it might use hidden license plate readers, quote, for a set period of time while the Border Patrol is conducting an investigation of an area or interest or smuggling route. Once the investigation is complete or the illicit activity is stopped in that area, the covert cameras are removed, end quote. Right. We take them down once we complete our Crime Stopper investigation. Horseshit. According to interviews, police reports, and court documents, that is not how the program has operated in practice. Doesn't make a goddamn bit of difference what it said in the original order put together under the toilet rat's first fascist administration. Doesn't matter. License plate readers have become a major and in some places a permanent fixture for the Border Patrol. Now, where are they? Well, as you're driving around your town, your city, your county, your state, who the fuck knows? I mean, you got your eyes on the road. You're watching this maddening traffic that gets worse every day. You're stopping for school bus flashing lights. You're watching a kid on the bicycle. As you drive down a city street, all that shit that is attached now to power poles along the side of the street. Light poles, phone poles, whatever, TV cables, whatever that shit is. Do you know what those devices are attached to the top that for some reason are scanning the street below? Well, fuck no, you don't know. Neither do I. And how do we find out? Well, that's where checkmate comes in because there's no way to find out. Might as well tip your king over. It's all over. Jesus Christ. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. You know, the Progressive Voices Network brings you commercial-free commentary from today's leading progressive radio hosts and pundits, like me, Mike Malloy, 24 hours a day. I'm not your typical old guy from the 80s or the 90s talk radio host, and Progressive Voices is not your typical talk radio network. It's a listener-supported nonprofit with no corporate control whatsoever over our broadcast. So hosts like me, Mike Malloy, are free to rant and scream and carry on about whatever we like. We're often controversial, but we're never boring. Weeknights, 9 p.m. in the East, 6 p.m. in the West on the Progressive Voices Network. Always progressive, always on. I'm Mike Malloy. Keep it lit.